Usually when we talk about repairing a starship after a massive battle, there's this expectation of clinical precision.
Oh, definitely.
Right, like the engineering team runs a diagnostic, and the scan just highlights a ruptured EPS conduit, those glowing plasma veins that power the ship.
Yeah, or it flags some damaged hull plating.
Exactly. And the chief engineer just points at a screen and says, there it is, fix it. It's very cut and dry.
It's incredibly binary, really. I mean, the metal is either broken or it's not broken.
Right.
The timeline for that physical repair is clean, it's mathematical, and it's totally predictable.
And we love that predictability. We like our problems to be visible, to just sort of be easily categorized into a straightforward repair queue.
Oh, human nature craves that.
But then you step past the hull plating and into the world of the crew living inside that ship.
Yeah, that's where it gets messy.
So messy. You get into human and alien psychology, neurodevelopment, trauma, and suddenly that reliable diagnostic scanner it's entirely useless.
Right, because we're looking at a murky landscape.
Totally murky. Because today, we are cracking open the personal logs of the USS Arawyn crew to find out what actually happens after a starship survives a near-fatal attack.
And this is such a fascinating deep dive into the source material.
It really is. They are currently on shore leave at Starbase 369, right in the middle of the Starfall Carnival, and their physical ship is, being put back together.
Which sets the stage for our overarching mission here, which is examining the psychological repairs.
Yeah.
We are exploring this profound collection of personal accounts that document how people process severe trauma.
And how they manage to rebuild fractured trust, right?
Exactly. And how they attempt to prepare for the next inevitable crisis in deep space. And, while the setting involves alien worlds and advanced tech, the human, Vulcan, and even holographic responses to extreme stress are fundamentally universal.
Okay, let's unpack this because we're starting right inside the mind. We have this fascinating personal log from Ryan Collingway.
Ah, the engineer on the Arawyn.
Right. He's meeting with the ship's counselor, Dr. Chris Emerson. And on the absolute surface level, Ryan's logs make it sound like he is having a textbook, relaxing shore leave.
Yeah, he's checking all the boxes for quote-unquote healing.
He really is. He adopted a pet rabbit named Spencer. He bought a yo-yo. And he even hints at this budding romance with a woman named Alura.
Sounds idyllic, right?
It does. But then he sits down with his counselor and makes a very specific, aggressive request. He actually demands to be removed from mandated therapy.
Which is such a wild pivot. But his reasoning for that demand is actually a brilliant piece of self-awareness.
How so?
Well, he tells Dr. Emerson that the compulsory nature of the therapy is the very thing preventing it from working.
Ah, right.
There's this constant, unspoken threat that he might lose his engineering rank and his place on the ship if he doesn't comply, and it's creating a barrier. He just cannot truly trust a process that is, holding his career hostage.
Which is entirely counterintuitive to how institutions usually handle trauma, isn't it? I mean, usually we treat mandated therapy as a necessary safety net for a crew that has just been through a war zone.
Yeah, standard protocol.
But Ryan is basically saying the net is choking him. It's like wearing a heavy medical cast on a broken arm.
That's a great way to put it.
Right, because that rigid cast is absolutely necessary when the injury is fresh to keep the bone stable. But eventually, you have to cut the cast off if you ever want the underlying muscle to rebuild its own strength.
Exactly.
Ryan is basically telling her, take the cast off so I can actually do the heavy lifting myself.
And the thing is, Dr. Emerson recognizes that exact dynamic. She knows that if you leave a psychological cast on too long, emotional atrophy sets in.
Right, you get weaker.
She actually notes that he has already shown immense growth. He's stopped freezing under intense pressure, and he is successfully differentiating his immediate emotional reactions from his long-term logical decisions.
But she doesn't just let him walk away completely, does she? Right.
No, because she is a skilled clinician. She doesn't just cut him loose. Once she agrees to remove the manlate, taking that metaphorical cast off, she guides him to a startling realization.
Oh, this part blew my mind.
Right. The recent violent attack on the Arawyn is not his foundational trauma.
Yeah, the battle was just the loud, immediate noise that was, covering up the real issue.
The underlying fracture.
Ryan had been suffering from these recurring nightmares where the ship's warp core was overloading and exploding.
Which on the surface looks like classic PTSD from a space battle.
Exactly. But Emerson helps him realize those dreams are actually fueled by the heavy, unresolved weight of his father's expectations.
Yeah.
The exploding warp core wasn't a fear of dying in space. It was a manifestation of his fear of completely failing his family line.
What's fascinating here is how the crew seeks out different cognitive frameworks to manage this kind of internal noise. Because, recognizing that your father's expectations are haunting you is only step one.
Naming the ghost doesn't banish it.
Exactly. To manage the physical anxiety, Ryan turns to meditation. He schedules a session outside the quarters of Commander Batenburg.
I have to highlight the sensory details in this scene and the logs because they are just so grounding.
Oh, they're so relatable.
Ryan is trying desperately to find his zen, but he is slightly allergic to the commander's cat.
Mittens, right.
Yes, Mittens. So his eyes are watering, his nose is itching, and he's trying to process this deep parental trauma while sneezing.
It's so good.
It just strips away the mystical veneer of meditation and makes it incredibly human. But Commander Batenburg, she remains an absolute rock.
She really does.
She walks him through a rigid 4-2-6-1 breathing technique. So you inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 2, exhale for 6, hold for 1.
And the clinical psychology behind that specific breathing structure is vital.
How so?
Well, when trauma is triggered, the brain's amygdala basically hijacks the nervous system, right? It sends thoughts spiraling out of control.
Right, like the ship, the counselor, the new girlfriend, the rabbit, all of it.
Exactly. The 4-2-6-1 breathing forces the parasympathetic nervous system to engage. It acts as a biological anchor.
Okay.
Once his heart rate drops, Batenburg helps him label his intrusive thoughts without judging them until he zeroes in on that core issue again. She uses a clinical term, calling his father's pressure the primary disturbance.
But doing that work is incredibly uncomfortable. But it requires rigorous, painful honesty.
It's grueling.
And not everyone in these logs is looking for that kind of discomfort. Some people actively seek out a comforting illusion.
That dichotomy is beautifully illustrated in the sources. Earlier in the logs, we see the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Rhea Amberlin, sharing a quiet, profound lunch with Commander Batenburg at a Vulcan cafe.
Yeah, they're bonding over authentic plum-eek soup and Captor.
Yes, Captor, which are these dense, crunchy Vulcan croutons.
Right. But beneath the culinary pleasantries, there is this heavy shared silence.
Because they are both survivors of a horrific past disaster at a colony called Lamina IV.
Yeah. They share the unspoken weight of having seen immense loss. It's a trauma that bonds them without requiring a single word.
They understand the gravity of real survival.
They do. But then, late at night amidst the neon lights of the Starfall Carnival, Dr. Amberlin and a junior officer named Lieutenant Remington visit a carnival fortune teller named Guyla.
And Guyla is selling the exact opposite of the heavy, uncomfortable truth Ryan and Batenburg were working through.
She is selling a shortcut.
Guyla's entire tent is a masterclass in psychological manipulation. She is exploiting the cognitive desire for certainty that trauma victims often crave.
Because when people feel out of control, they will pay anything for an illusion of structure.
Absolutely. Gayla burns Vulcan herbs in her pipe to chemically relax her marks.
Miggy?
Yeah, and she uses tarot cards to improvise vague, comforting futures based on, micro-expressions and body language.
But she unfortunately picked the absolute worst mark on the station.
Oh, she really did.
Dr. Amberlin has been reading tarot cards since she was 10 years old. She knows the architecture of the deck inside and out.
She's an expert.
And Rhea doesn't view tarot as mystical prediction. She understands it as a complex psychological tool.
Right. It operates like a Rorschach test for the human subconscious. The archetypes force you to project your own internal conflicts onto the cards.
Exactly. So when Gayla flips over the Seven of Swords, which is traditionally a card representing theft, betrayal, or deception.
A heavy card.
Yeah. And Gayla tries to smoothly tell Rhea that actually means transparency, just to keep the reading positive. Rhea clinically takes her apart.
Rhea dissects the performance with surgical precision. She points out that Guyla's spread is geometrically sloppy, her narrative sequence is contradictory, and, well, she abandons her own established rules the second she senses resistance from the client.
It's brutal. Rhea delivers this devastating critique. She says, intuition without commitment is just improvisation.
That line is a gut punch.
It really is. Guyla's putting on a cheap performance that entirely depends on the traumatized person not looking too closely at the cracks.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of recovery, it highlights a crucial psychological divergence.
Okay, tell me more.
Genuine healing frameworks, like Ryan advocating for voluntary therapy or the strict biological discipline of the 4261 meditation, they require rigorous structure.
Right.
They demand that you look closely at the primary disturbance, no matter how much it hurts. Guyla is offering the illusion of clarity without the grueling work of commitment. It's avoidance masking as insight.
It makes you wonder about our own daily lives, honestly. For you listening, when the noise in your head gets too loud or the pressure at work is overwhelming, do you actively seek out the uncomfortable truth that actually forces you to grow?
Or do you look for your own version of a fortune teller to just hand you a comforting lie?
It's a vital question.
Yeah.
However, as the logs make abundantly clear, psychological frameworks can only carry so much of the burden.
Yeah, the mind can label the primary disturbance, but the body keeps the score.
Exactly. When the mind has labeled the trauma, but the body is still flooded with trapped adrenaline, that kinetic energy needs an outlet.
It has to be processed physically.
And that's exactly why Tactical Officer Grayson McKinney completely changes the approach on Holodeck 2. He doesn't program a relaxing beach simulator or a quiet forest.
No, he creates the Anderson Silva Combat Institute.
Set in a humid, gritty version of São Paulo. The sensory details in the logs are visceral. I mean, the room smells like old sweat, rough canvas mats, and that sharp chemical tang of resin on boxing gloves.
It smells like violent exertion.
Yeah, it does.
Grayson's philosophy shifts the focus from cognitive therapy to physiological release. He stands in front of the crew after just fighting a massive 250-pound holographic opponent and tells them that the human body did not evolve to absorb the constant low-grade terror of deep space without consequence.
Right.
He explicitly states this is not an aggressive fitness program or a military drill. He calls the fighting cage a sanctuary.
Now, I found myself immediately pushing back on this premise while reading the sources.
I think a lot of people would.
Right. Because you have a starship crew that just barely survived a violent, traumatizing attack that nearly destroyed their home. How on earth does introducing more violence and encouraging stressed-out officers to punch each other in a steel cage relieve the trauma of violence?
It seems backwards.
Doesn't introducing physical conflict risk completely fracturing the team's cohesion?
That pushback makes complete sense from a civilian perspective, and it is exactly why Grayson frames the holodeck the way he does.
Okay, unpack that for me.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and look at the endocrine system's response to an attack in deep space, we see the problem. When an officer is staring at a warp core breach or a hostile alien weapons array, their body is instantly flooded with survival adrenaline.
Right, pure panic mode.
But you cannot physically fight a warp core. You cannot punch a sensor array. You just have to stand at a console and run mathematical calculations while your body is screaming at you to run or fight. That massive spike of chemical energy has absolutely nowhere to go. It gets trapped in the muscle tissue.
So the fight or flight response is triggered, but they are denied both the fight and the flight.
Precisely. The Sparrow Club, as they call it, strips away the rigid Starfleet rank structure, it removes protocol, and it takes these incredibly complex existential threats of the void and reduces them to solvable equations.
Grayson's core mantra in the ring is, physics always wins.
Yes, because when you step onto that canvas mat, the problem standing in front of you isn't the terrifying, infinite darkness of space. It's just a matter of leverage, gravity, momentum, and breath.
It teaches the nervous system how to bend under pressure without snapping.
And we see that dynamic play out beautifully with the crew. Even Counselor Chris Emerson, the therapist from earlier, gets into the ring.
That part was amazing. She spars with Inga, this much larger, incredibly strong security officer. It becomes a pure match of agility versus raw power.
Yeah, Chris is slipping punches, dodging and weaving.
But eventually she miscalculates and takes a heavy back fist right to the temple.
Ouch.
Right. But she absorbs the hit, rolls with the momentum, pops back up, and counters with a massive, precise strike straight to Inga's sternum that completely drops her and stops the fight.
And instead of aggression or anger, there's immediate mutual respect.
They literally sit there on the mat, catching their breath, debriefing the physics of the strike.
That is the ultimate goal of the sanctuary. It builds profound, unshakable trust because they are learning where each other's breaking points are in a controlled, safe environment.
He's credible.
But the combatants aren't the only ones processing stress. The sidelines of the holodeck are just as revealing about the crew's coping mechanisms.
Like Security Chief Aya Flamia, he walks in to observe, flanked by his assistant, and this incredibly theatrical, snarky hologram named Ignis.
I love Ignis.
He's lounging upside down in midair, dryly noting that he can't quite tell if he's walked into an underground fight club or an emotional intervention.
Ignis may be providing comedic relief, but his analysis is completely accurate. It is a physiological intervention. And sitting nearby, we have the ship's doctor, Claire Dunross. She brought her medical kit into the holodeck and is quietly patching up bruised knuckles, wrapping sprained wrists, and icing scraped shoulders.
Her banter with Grayson is a highlight of the logs.
Oh, absolutely.
Grayson tries to goad her into joining the mass brawl on the mats, and she calmly refuses to participate in the chaos.
But she hints she might take a private sparring session with him later.
Yes, and she delivers this amazing deadpan warning. She tells him that as a trained physician, if he throws her too hard onto the canvas, she knows exactly which nerve clusters to target to paralyze his arm in retaliation.
It's humorous, but it establishes the core rule of the room, which is controlled, consensual contact. Every single person in that holodeck is finding a specific way to vent their internalized pressure.
Whether that is through throwing a physical punch, utilizing humor to diffuse tension, or simply acting as the caretaker who patches up the pieces. It makes you look at your own routines. For you listening, where's your Sparrow Club? How do you safely vent the pressure of your daily responsibilities when the adrenaline of modern life has nowhere polite to go?
It's an important reflection.
Because if you don't find a way to burn it off on the mat, you will inevitably carry that volatility into your decision-making. Which brings us to the final critical layer of these logs, the burden of leadership.
Right. Once the mind has labeled the trauma and the body has vented the adrenaline, the crew still has to function together under a chain of command.
The day-to-day operations.
The central theme shifts to how seasoned leaders guide the next generation, balancing the harsh, unforgiving realities of duty with the necessity of allowing people to grow.
We get an incredible look at this through envoy Stephen McCaffery. He essentially ambushes Dr. Claire Dunross by inviting her to a dinner party that, to her surprise, is packed with senior Starfleet captains and admirals.
Claire is understandably annoyed. She feels totally put on the spot.
Right. But Stephen explains his reasoning to her later, and the psychology behind it is brilliant. The Dunross family name carries a massive amount of historical and political weight within the fleet.
It is the heavy burden of legacy. Stephen tells her that for the rest of her career, every formal introduction she makes will arrive with her last name having already entered the room before her.
Right, people will have preconceived notions.
Exactly. By ambushing her at the dinner, he forced those senior captains to interact with her first as a highly competent, composed young doctor who could easily handle a stressful social situation.
He deliberately gave her the opportunity to prove her competence before her family's reputation could build an invisible wall between them.
It's masterful leadership.
It really is. But Stephen isn't just managing young officers, he's dealing with leadership in his own family. His 15-year-old son, Will, desperately wants to be a Starfleet pilot.
Yeah, Will is frustrated. He's complaining bitterly about being kept out of the advanced flight simulators, and he sits at the window critiquing the docking traffic outside the Starbase.
Kids, right. But Stephen steps in and delivers an incredibly sobering reality check to his son.
It is arguably one of the most powerful thematic moments in the entire collection of sources.
I totally agree.
Stephen looks at Will and tells him that the helm of a starship does not exist to make a young man feel brave or to fulfill a desire for adventure.
Right.
The pilot seat exists purely because the people behind that seat trust the pilot with their lives. They trust the pilot to bring them home safely.
He is forcing his son to understand the lethal cost of the chair before he ever allows him to touch the actual control.
It's about responsibility over ego.
So it seems entirely counterintuitive then when we see what Captain Sabrina Corbin does next.
Oh, this is quite a pivot.
She takes a shuttle out to physically observe the Arawyn in dry dock. She looks at the fresh hull plating and sees the subtle, discolored scars where the ship was literally ripped open by violence.
The physical reminders.
Yeah. But as she reviews the logs, she recognizes that the bizarre events of the Starfall Carnival, the weird meditations, the bad fortune tellers, the bruising fights in the Sparrow Club, they've effectively healed the minds and bodies of her crew.
The ship is ready.
So she makes a command decision that feels almost reckless. She calls Ryan Collingway, the same engineer who is just trying to unpack his severe father trauma, into her ready room, and she promotes him to acting chief engineer.
The contrast is stark. because Ryan's internal monologue during the promotion is pure, unfiltered panic.
Oh, complete panic.
He retreats to his quarters, stares at his pet rabbit, and comes to the terrifying realization that he is absolutely 100% not ready for this level of responsibility.
When I first read that, I wondered why Corbin would give a massive promotion to someone who is actively struggling with a panic attack.
It feels risky.
So what does this all mean? Well, when you place it next to Stephen and his son, the parallel clicks into place. She isn't handing Ryan the rank as a shiny reward for surviving a battle. She is forcing him into the seat so he learns the crushing weight of it.
Yes.
Her exact words to him are, "This ship will tell you very quickly whether you're listening to it properly. I suggest you pay attention."
This raises an important question about the fundamental nature of readiness. The instinct is to believe that leadership means waiting until someone is perfectly prepared, fully healed, and completely confident before handing them power.
Which never happens.
Right. The reality of deep space and of life is that perfect readiness never arrives. There is always lingering trauma. There is always more to learn.
True leadership, as demonstrated by Corbin and McCaffery, is about creating a controlled environment where a subordinate is forced to carry the weight.
Whether that is navigating a dinner party of intimidating captains or bearing the title of acting chief engineer, the leader provides a space where the individual can either rise to the occasion or fail safely enough that the leader can intervene and help them learn from the collapse.
You do not get ready by waiting in the simulator. You get ready by doing the actual job under the very real weight of the responsibility.
Exactly.
And for you listening, you will inevitably face moments in your own career or personal life where you are handed a massive, terrifying responsibility long before you feel ready for it. The true test isn't whether you feel brave. It's whether you are listening to your environment properly to meet that challenge.
It is a cohesive ecosystem of survival.
It really is.
From Ryan doing the painful cognitive work to unearth his foundational trauma, to Grayson's tactical team finding physical sanctuary in the simple, unbreakable physics of leverage and gravity, to leaders passing the heavy torch of responsibility by pushing their people into the deep end.
Yeah, every single action we've analyzed is a mechanism for turning the chaos of a near-fatal attack into structured growth.
It is an incredible journey through the psychology of recovery.
But here's where it gets really interesting. We have spent this entire deep dive marveling at how brilliantly this crew builds these coping mechanisms.
Right.
They have the 4-2-6-1 breathing structure, they rely on the physical release of the Sparrow Club, and they lean heavily on the wisdom of these seasoned mentors.
They have built highly effective sanctuaries to keep the darkness at bay.
But what happens when a coping mechanism slowly calcifies into a crutch?
Oh, that's a dangerous tipping point.
Right. If the next inevitable crisis they face in deep space specifically neutralizes their physical strength, rendering the physics of the Sparrow Club totally useless. Or what if a communications blackout completely cuts them off from the mentors who usually guide them?
How does a crew survive when the carefully constructed sanctuaries they rely on for balance are suddenly violently stripped away?
That is the ultimate test of psychological resilience. Can the foundation they've built hold the weight when the comforting structure around it is gone?
Something for you to ponder as you navigate your own sanctuaries and challenges this week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll leave you with that thought until next time.